Welcome, Stupid versus Spread. This is the divisional round of the NFL playoffs. We're going to recap, and excuse me, I have the hiccups. By recap, I mean give a very hot take, I think, for every game, and then we'll get right into picks like we always do. That's going to get annoying, isn't it?
I kind of love this.
So let's dive right into it. Biggest takeaway: Seahawks 49ers, Mike.
First of all,
So let's set the stage. Seahawks 23, 49ers 41, final score. Um, Pretty dominant performance from the 49ers. Nothing special.
I think in
We
the
all kind of
second half they were
yeah,
dominant.
in the second half. It was very close in the first half. I think Seattle was actually winning in the first half at halftime, but 49ers pull away with it. Like everyone kind of thought would happen. Seahawks had a good year, but obviously are not set up for success deep in the playoffs as it currently stands. What was your takeaway from this, and how are you using it going forward? Let's put it that way.
So I think my biggest takeaway was how, like, Brock Purdy looked like a rookie quarterback in his first playoff game in the first half. I think that was sort of to be expected. They figured it out mostly by running the ball in the second half. I think, contrary to like Brock Purdy's got it moving forward, I think you could still see another game like that, and that's part of I think the logic of where the line is currently for this week's game against Dallas. I think the what I was most surprised by, I think, was the fact that San Francisco is not as dominant defensively as I think most people assumed they were going to be, me included. That's obviously why the game went over. And Geno Smith has played well. You know, DK is obviously a weapon. Tyler Lockett's a weapon, but I think going forward, I Brock Purdy's going to have to score points, and I think that we're not looking at like Ravens historically, Seahawks historically, one of those like a defense winning a championship sort of team.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
that was kind of the narrative that was building going into the playoffs with Nick Bosa and with Greenlaw and their linebackers and how well they'd been playing down the stretch was that San Francisco had a team that could almost win a championship purely defensively. I think that's out the window. And maybe that's just because that's not the way the NFL works anymore. But I think it's more like that defense is just not exactly what we thought it was going to be. So I think going forward, you have to take a little bit of caution in larger spreads with San Francisco, unless they come out and prove that was an outlier. Um, that maybe they are going to have to, score to win a game, and I think that's scary for San Francisco fans because they're perfectly comfortable with Brock Purdy turning around and handing the ball off and then making smart throws off of play action. But if I think there's a chance that if San Francisco gets behind, they're put in a spot of real trouble real quick, and I think that could be a thing against Dallas this week.
I think my biggest takeaway was how well Brock Purdy played in the latter half of the game. I think he. It's not that San Francisco started out struggling, but Purdy didn't look like an all star. Missed a few throws that he probably could have, but in that second half, he really turned it on. And if you look at the stats, right? If you just look at his stats, um, he went 18 for 30, so not. I mean, it's a little low on completion percentage, but he had 330 yards and 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. So I think I wasn't surprised, but I was if I was the 49ers, I'd be pleased with how Purdy played, especially kind of bouncing back, maybe adjusting to some of those um, pre-reads that he saw earlier in the game. And then I think for me, it seemed like the 49ers let up like bursts, if that makes sense, of plays. So like they'd have a good string of plays where like they don't allow Seattle to really move the ball that well. And then, second quarter comes around and it's drive, score, drive, score, drive, score to go up in the first half. And I don't know that would be successful against a more difficult team to play, like the Cowboys. We'll see how it turns out. We have more obviously on the Cowboys coming up, but I think if I'm San Francisco, I think that's a good baseline, that game, to get you momentum forward, especially with Purdy, get him some confidence. Not that the regular season doesn't matter, but obviously shaking off the jitters of your first playoff game and then going down the stretch and seeing how things do it is highly imperative and important. So I think that's what impressed me the most.
I think to back that up,
Yeah.
I just looked it up because I was curious what Brock Purdy's average depth of target was for that game because I wanted to see if that was a function of the weapons making big plays or Purdy making the big plays. His average depth of target was 12 and a half yards, which is the highest for a San Francisco
It's a
quarterback.
lot.
Get this, since 2017.
Wow. That's a lot. That's
So
he's looking deep.
yeah,
He's
that
not
lends
checking
credence to
down.
your point that there's, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm just not paying attention enough. Then that they were throwing the ball down the field in that second half.
I think it was so. What it for me, what it was the inconsistency in the accuracy, especially in the first half of the game. That's where a lot of those like incompletions came in. But once Purdy could make those throws and those were completed, like he did pretty well. 18 completed catches for 330 yards and 3 touchdowns is a really good ratio if you're just looking at it that way. And you're not overworking him by throwing the ball 45 times. I'll have more on that with the Bucks. But Purdy played well, played a balanced game. McCaffrey ran the ball for 120 yards. It was a good game plan
McCaffrey looked
overall.
great.
Yes, he did. So I think they have a lot of momentum. I know there's debate about whether it's a thing, but I think they have a lot of momentum going forward. I'm excited to see how they do
Yeah,
against the Cowboys.
I think I take a more cautious approach with the Niners just because I think we expected a more dominant defensive performance, and I think yes, Purdy played a good game, but I what I'll say is too that he had the viable threat of the running game the entire game to help him make some of those throws.
Yes,
And like I said, my only concern is if they get behind, which Dallas's game plan has to be score first and score early. Um, can Brock Purdy win in a one dimensional offense? And so I think that could be an issue for them. But
I do too. I do too. Okay, we'll move on to. I don't know if I would say the best, but maybe the most shocking game. Uh,
no, I mean
Charge
it was the best game. That
Chargers Jags.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look. So Chargers go up what 27-0 in the first 27-7 in the first half. With the Jags only scoring at the very end, and then Jags come back. My biggest takeaway is that, like, I was impressed with Trevor Lawrence, impressed how the Jags did. I, if I'm the Chargers, man, that's bad. That's like a real bad, not even like a bad loss, but that's a bad loss where that could resonate into next season, kind of bad. Um, I I don't know what the offensive scheme in that second half was, but the fact that you're not running the ball down the Jaguars' throats, running the clock out. I mean, there were way too many passing plays in that second half. I mean, shame on the Chargers for blowing that. I know the fans don't deserve that kind of thing, but my takeaway going forward for this week is that I don't think the Jags, not that they didn't deserve to win that game, because they certainly did with that second half performance, but I think they're just in a league below where they need to be. And we'll get to it, but that's not how I feel about the Giants matching up against the Eagles this week. I think the Jags are just going to really, 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 really struggle against the Kansas City Chiefs. And with the way the Chiefs play, they're never out of it. But if they take that kind of commanding lead in the beginning, and Trevor Lawrence, obviously 3 picks right away, not good. But if I think Lawrence throwing 1 interception next week spells doom for the Jaguars, and I'm interested to see if that's something he can shake off and prevent, or something that he's going to struggle with down the stretch.
Yeah, I think the Chargers might have gotten rid of that problem by firing Joe Lombardi. Maybe I also don't know if this resonates in the next year. I think as stupid as this sounds, just because they're the Chargers, like I think there's you could if you injected them with truth serum and deep down in places they don't talk about. There was no way the Chargers actually fully believed that they were going to win that game at halftime, even though they were up 27-7. And yeah, I think it was everything that could have gone wrong or had to have gone wrong in order for Jacksonville to stay in that game did. Um, it just, and I do think most of that is on Lombardi because you assume Staley's not calling the offensive plays. Granted, they didn't get it done defensively, but I think even you can make the argument that Joey Bosa is more to blame for that than even Brandon Staley is because if he doesn't take that, one of those um, unsportsmanlike conducts, they win. The
Hmm.
kicker missed a kick that would have sealed the game. Like, and pretty much everything that could have gone wrong did. But that's the Chargers. I
I mean,
think.
yeah, it takes a lot to blow a 27-7 lead when you're rolling into the second half. You have to work and make multiple mistakes to try and do it. And sure enough, they did, and they made
No, I
every
know.
mistake in the
I
book that
I
they needed
mean,
to.
the crazy part too is like the coaching message should have been very simple at halftime. Like if you score one more touchdown, the game's over. By the time that you score that touchdown, and by the time that that amount of time comes off the clock, and when you look at it that way, if you score one more touchdown in that game, the game's over. There's no way
Hmm.
that Jacksonville could come back, and they just couldn't do it. And it's I don't. It's a little bit Justin Herbert's fault, but it's really not too much. He didn't,
I don't think
he
so.
didn't throw picks. He didn't let them back into that game. They just didn't execute to the point where they could put the game away.
And
Um,
I'll have a similar comment with the Vikings, but the Chargers losing was not on their quarterback. The Chargers losing was on their coaching
yeah, and that's why I
and their
think
defense. And their defense.
yeah, and their defense, and that's why I think to really fix this problem, the Chargers would have needed to get Sean Payton, but they can't really fire Brendan Staley unless they know Sean Payton's coming, which is after we
Uh,
saw all of it with the Dolphins, there's no way they're going to be able to get away with that. So
Correct.
they're in a tough spot where I don't think they could. The only way to fix it really is to fire. Um, the only way to fix it is to fire Brendan Staley, but they can't really fire Brendan Staley because
And they haven't done it yet, and we're like a
I
couple
think
days
he's.
removed
I
from
think
that
the fact
loss.
that
I
they
think he's
fired
safe.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, the fact. I mean, that's a great point. The fact that they fired Lombardi is pretty indicative of the fact that they're not going to fire him. But yeah, I don't think they're going to fire him. I think they would have done it as they were leaving,
No, and he
kind of
like
thing.
it is. Pardon my take made a good point. It is funny that Brendan Staley is like the new age analytics guy, and I think I even said part of the logic in picking Jacksonville was I felt like this was going to be the game where he screwed something up, and he actually played it way too conservatively. Like I think there were chances to go for fourth down to put that game away, and he didn't do it. But enough about a team that's not playing. The I think yeah, I tend to agree. I think the Jaguars I think they're building something, but I think that this is where it stops. And like it's not necessarily they're not going to be at fault if they lose this game. Nobody's going to
No,
look down on them if they lose
no,
this game. Even if it's a pitiful performance, not quite like a Georgia TCU sort of performance, but even if they go out and get sort of shellacked and they're never really in it, it's a growing experience for Trevor Lawrence. You made it further than you probably would have expected. You won the division, and you have a better outlook than every team in your division going forward because you actually have a quarterback. Now the Texans will fix. Maybe they won't fix that problem because I'm not necessarily sold on C.J. Stroud if that's who they end up with. So, um, yeah. So I think Jacksonville's in a great spot where the rest of this is gravy. I think, but I do think that Jacksonville has to stay in this game early because it's weird.
yeah,
It sounds
100%.
like counterintuitive. Like they just came back from a 27-point deficit. You have to feel like if they're down a lot, they'll go in at halftime with a ton of confidence. But I think having Mahomes on the other side of the field changes everything for
Draft.
the
I
way
mean,
that.
you could be down two touchdowns in the fourth quarter with like 11 minutes left, and they have three timeouts, and I don't at all marginally feel safe with a 14-point lead, kind of
Yeah,
thing.
no, that's what I was going to say. They could come back from a 27-point deficit, go up two touchdowns, and if Mahomes has 3 minutes left, you still can't feel like you won the game yet. If
Right,
Mahomes
right.
has a minute and a half left, you still can't feel like you won the game yet. So that's where I think Jacksonville is gonna. The only path to victory for them in this game is that they have to get up and just keep staying ahead of Kansas City, and even that
Hmm.
we saw with the Bills last year. Just it didn't work to the point where they were ahead with 13 seconds left, and it still didn't work. So I'm not confident they can do that in this game. I think it's a good run. I think the bigger yeah, I guess the takeaway from Jacksonville's perspective is that this season is now a success, a
Yes.
bona fide 100%. There's no doubts about Trevor Lawrence. He has the confidence of winning a playoff game. that's the takeaway for the Jaguars is you've already had a successful season. If you go out and put up even a moderately respectable showing against Kansas City, you're you're in great shape.
Yeah, I would agree, and I think how that program was at the end of Urban's tenure there to bounce back and be in the divisional round. That's something special.
Yeah.
Chargers Bills. I'm sorry, Finns Bills. I think the Bills lose this game if Tua is fully healthy. Obviously, that's not the case. Teddy Bridgewater also didn't play. I'm not surprised that they covered a 14-point spread in a playoff game. I thought the entirety of the team was pretty good. I feel bad that the Dolphins. I mean, there was a lot of missed play calls there. That the play clock winding down on critical fourth down, stuff like that. My takeaway is that if the Bills come out like this against the Bengals, it'll be really hard for the Bills to win. Like the Bills came out firing and then just were like, "Oh, we won." It was like the first quarter. They're like, "We did it. We got it. It's in the bag. We're up. We're covering." Like that seemed to be the mentality. And then it was like, "Oh shit. Okay, this is a game." So my kind of takeaway there is if the Bills aren't going 100% the entire day when they're playing the Bengals this coming week, I think they're in trouble.
I think my takeaway is similar but different. I think mine was that the and maybe this is just Tony Romo sort of speaking it into existence, but I think my takeaway is that the Bills feel the weight of expectation, and I think that that's not good for them going forward. Um, and I think you could tell in that third quarter when Miami took the lead, and I think Josh Allen went 3-and-out, and I think they got a turnover that sort of brought them back, like got their confidence back in that game more than anything else. Um, but there's definitely a moment where there was a lot, and Tony Romo said it. There's a lot of nervous energy, both from the Bills sideline and from the stadium, which is natural because it's a playoff game and you're down at home. But I think it's more for a team as good as they are playing a rookie third string quarterback. Even if you go down 7 in the third quarter, or even in the fourth quarter, you shouldn't feel like you're not out of the game, but you shouldn't feel like you're
Right.
seriously in jeopardy yet. And that's sort of how it felt.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I think that that's a little bit indicative of the Bills sort of feeling a little bit of pressure here. And as we talk about the game against Cincinnati, which I think this is the most intriguing matchup of the weekend. And I
I do
think
too.
almost certainly. I think Dallas and San Francisco is going to be. I don't really know what to expect, but I think there's a lot going on with this Cincinnati Buffalo matchup that makes it
Yeah, I do
extremely
too.
compelling.
Um, okay, Giants Vikings. Here's my takeaway. I have two takeaways. One, the Giants are probably better than I thought they were, and have probably picked up a good amount of momentum going into the final weeks of the season, with the exception of how they played the Eagles, but they weren't really trying because they were locked into that sixth seed, which is what they had. Um, the Vikings losing is not on Kirk Cousins, and the narrative, and there's like a narrative behind the personality of Kirk, blah 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 blah. That's fine. This was a coaching error. This was a coaching loss. Minnesota Vikings only scored 24 points, and Kirk Cousins went 31 for 39, throwing for 275 yards and 2 touchdowns, rushing another touchdown. Like it it's wild to me that teams with good quarterbacks, or at least decent quarterbacks, can't scheme correctly to get the ball down the field more. Like this was the Vikings lost because they didn't control the clock, their defense didn't show up, and they designed plays on offense that weren't quite getting them the pizzazz they needed, right? If that makes sense. They never had multiple explosive plays. They never had an opportunity to make a play on defense, and in the end, the Giants showed us the Vikings were, for the first time, didn't win a one-score game this year. So I was impressed with Daniel Jones, how he played controlled, precise in the pocket, passing and rushing. I think Dable's got him lined up to do great things, but this isn't on Kirk. That's my takeaway. And going forward with the Giants, I like the Giants, I think. And when we talk about the Giants Eagles game, I'll talk about this kind of matchup. But I think the Giants are posed for good stuff. Mike?
I think my takeaway is that Brian Dable might be the best coach in the NFL right now.
Certainly the
And
best hire for the past year
no,
or
I think it's
two.
more than that. Like I haven't seen. It feels sort of Belichickian in the way that he is able to. The game plan is so different every game, and it's so unpredictable, and it feels like every team he plays just it doesn't matter. It's in the fact that they win these games they're not supposed to win. Because don't get me wrong, like uh, you said, you think the Giants are better than you thought they were. I don't. I think they are not that talented a football team that is playing incredibly well coached, disciplined football. Um,
You
and I
just
think that
described every winning New York Giants Super Bowl team in the past 15 years.
I know, but I think that this team is noticeably less talented than the two other Super Bowl teams that they've had.
That's fair.
Like
I mean, the
noticeably.
other two
Their
had
their
amazing
primary wide
defenses.
receiver is something called an Isaiah Hodgins. Like it doesn't make any sense, but only if you consider the fact that Dayball has been so good at scheming these games and so good at keeping teams off balance. And Wink Martindale has done an incredible job showing teams different looks. And they just nailed all of these hires to the point where I think this coaching staff might be the best in the NFL. I think he deserves to win Coach of the Year, but I think that's why I say he might be the best in the NFL, because I think you can already see how much of an impact based on the talent that's already there on that roster. Like the Giants were a laughing stock last year, a laughing stock, and
Hmm.
this is largely the same team because of cap. They're also in cap hell that is now a game away from the NFC Championship game. It's that only happens with a coach who's doing things that nobody can figure out, and that's why I think my biggest takeaway is how good a coach Dable is. And now, do I think it makes the same difference in this game? I don't know, but I mean, I'm not picking it to happen again. But I think he deserves. He's already getting a ton of credit. He's getting his
Coach of
flowers
the year
for
for
the
sure.
job he's
Yeah.
doing, but I think he deserves even more. I think he needs to be talked about already as like one of those like Belichick, Shanahan sort of
Okay.
coaches in the NFL who really can change the way that teams, succeed.
Yeah. Next one up, Ravens, Bengals. My takeaway going into this week, the Bengals need to play better if they're going to win against Buffalo. It's interesting that both those teams kind of are in that position where it's like if you took Buffalo from last week and paired it with how the Bengals could play like at their best or optimally, let's just call it that, not even at their best, like the Bengals will win. If you flip that and the Bengals come out and play against the Bills like they did against the Ravens, then and you flip it and the Bills are playing like in a good way, better than what they played. Bills are going to win. I think if both these teams come out flat, that's I mean, like I don't know what's going to happen, but I think Joe Burrow had a he didn't have a great game, didn't have a bad game, no turnovers on his part, but there were moments in this game where I was like, are the Bengals going to blow this? And then I remembered like, no, it's the Ravens with Tyler Huntley.
Yeah,
Like they're
it's
probably
Snoop
not.
Huntley and the Ravens.
Yeah, so I mean, there was a little. They looked flat in that first half, but they came out. They took care of business in the second half. I just not. I'm concerned about the Bengals if this is how they continue to play. I'll let you give your take.
I think I'm less concerned about the Bengals than I am sort of about the Bills. I think that's sort of feeding into my logic for this week. Um, I think I think my takeaway is that the Bengals feel more talented and sort of driven than they were last year,
I
which
think
seems
knowing they can get back there, being in the divisional round, and not having this like shitty follow up season to a Super Bowl appearance is like impressive.
yeah. But I think it's more like a testament to the mindset that team has right now. Because we were talking before this about some of the things Zach Taylor and Joe Burrow saying they never feel like they're underdogs to anybody, which everybody's going to say. But I think the way that they said it makes it seem like it's something they've been talking about in the building all week.
Yeah,
Which
or like the way Burrow. Someone asked like, what's the window for you to win a Super Bowl? And he was like, the window is as long as I'm on this team. It's
Yeah.
like, oh fuck, okay,
I don't
like
know about yeah, I don't know about that one, but I feel like the quotes this week I think were more revealing in that it's not just Joe Burrow sort of like Joe Burrowing. It's this team believes that
oh
they
yeah,
are as good as any in the NFL, and where I think that's making a difference. Their defense played incredibly well last year. Sam Hubbard's obviously a beast. Their offensive line's a little banged up, but I think overall
very very banged up.
they're playing better football than they were last year, which I think means that they are going to hang with anybody that they're going to play with. I think I'm willing to look more past the Bengals because I think the Ravens defense was juiced up to play that game, and I think the Ravens defense, you know,
Certainly has carried them into the playoffs.
yeah, and it feels like it feels more like the Bengals. The reason the Bengals game was close was more because of good things the Ravens did than bad things the Bengals did. Whereas the
Correct.
Bills Dolphins game was close because of bad things the Bills did,
Bills did.
not necessarily good things that the Dolphins did, and that may not bear itself out. But I don't think Joe Burrow didn't throw two picks, and like they just played better holistically. Now Huntley did have a great game, and Baltimore did a lot of good things offensively, and he played a great game for him in a playoff game. And besides like him thinking that he could reach that ball to the goal line, he was pretty good to be honest.
I mean,
And
that
so
play
I think,
really was the deciding factor in
yeah, no, it was it changed the entire script of that game. So I think that's my takeaway is that I think the Bengals winning that game where they didn't have their best offensive performance against a team that really, really hates them. Um, I think shows that they're playing with another level of confidence that I think should scare anybody they're playing.
I would agree. I would agree. Okay, last one, and then we'll get into the picks for this week and kind of talk about the games. Cowboys Bucks. Probably the last time we'll see Tom Brady, at the very least in a Bucks uniform. It sounds like possibly on the field at all. Although we've said that for years now. Um, Cowboys dominate the Bucks. Pretty, I would say, pretty handedly, right?
Yeah,
31-14,
no, this
and
this
one of
game
those
was
was a late.
close.
Yeah, my takeaway is that the Cowboys will not play this well for the rest of the playoffs.
Hmm.
Regardless of how far they get, the Cowboys will not play as well as they did against the Bucks. The Bucks were a very, very bad team. Cowboys came in as a very strong team, although a wild card team nonetheless. But they beat a Bucks team that was not over 500. Was not indicative of how the Cowboys have played, if that makes sense, right? So, and I'll talk about this, but the margin of victory or the margin of loss for the Cowboys is so high that the Cowboys aren't really good at winning close games, and I think they're going to struggle this coming week. That was my takeaway. I think they kind of, it sounds silly, but I think if you're a Cowboys fan, seeing how well they came out against the Bucks scares me for the following week, where you might think, oh, they might just like continue that. I would not have that mentality. But that's just me. Also, one last point: making your 45-year-old quarterback throw, what did he throw? 53 attempts. Tom Brady threw. Like, that's a crime. That's elder abuse. Like, you can't. That's fucking. That's a terrible game plan. But just shows you how like behind the eight ball from the get go that the Bucks were. You don't throw 50. I mean, let me look it up right now. But you don't throw over 50 pass attempts if you like have control of the game.
Yeah,
And
no,
it's
yeah,
yeah, it's. Oh, I'm sorry, not 53, 66 pass attempts Tom Brady had. That's absurd.
yeah,
That's
it's crazy.
absurd. And he had what's even crazier, he had 350 yards and only two touchdowns. But in either case, I mean, just a bad game plan from the Bucks, from a team that, with respect, probably didn't deserve to be in the playoffs with how they've been playing, partially. But that's my takeaway from that game.
Yeah, no, I think my takeaway is there's never been a more warranted coaching staff blow up of a division winner than I think was warranted in this case.
Yeah,
I think that they're going to go full tear down. I wouldn't be surprised. Like I wouldn't be
If
surprised if
Brady
Mike
if Brady
Evans is
leaves,
traded. Like
yeah,
I think once Brady leaves, the fire sale will begin on this era of the Buccaneers.
I would agree. I would
Because
agree.
they're gonna be in cap hell. They're not gonna know like they're not gonna be in a good enough spot to take one of these quarterbacks and have a reasonable expectation that they're gonna hit immediately. And so I think they're gonna be in a spot where they're gonna be the next team to tear it down. So that's my takeaway with the Bucks. They stink. They've stunk all year, and they kind of showed who they were in this game. I think for Dallas, it's it's interesting because um, they're like they're so Jekyll and Hyde at times this year. But I do think that their bad games have come against bad teams. So I don't know that they'll necessarily take his biggest step back this week coming in. But it's really tough to. I think my biggest takeaway with the Cowboys is I know that they're not the team that they were against the Buccaneers. They are not that good. Like they are not just going to embarrass everybody else that they play for the rest of the playoffs. So I think you're right. I think the problem is I have no idea how good they actually can be, and that's what's my takeaway is that I don't think that the Cowboys are necessarily a Super Bowl contender now because they beat that Bucks team. But I think there's a chance they could be, or they could just suck, and I don't know. And that's sort of my takeaway is I have no idea whether they're one of the best teams left or if they're maybe the worst team left.
I
And
think they're the second worst team left.
wow, but behind the Jags,
Second worst. I think the Jags are the worst.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. No, that's I mean the Jags are
Look,
the worst. And then,
look at the schedule of the Cowboys and look who they played all year. Their best win was probably trashing the Vikings 40-3.
yeah,
Aside from that, like they didn't end the season particularly well. Their win against the Eagles was without Jalen Hurts, which could be a very big factor come next week. Um, that the Packers beat them. They got trashed by the Bucks first week of the season, and obviously they've undone that by winning this past. But they've had games where they've let up real stinkers, and their average margin of loss is 11 points. So I'll talk that when we get into the picks. But
yeah.
yeah,
I keep going back and forth on the Dallas San Francisco spread. No clue.
all right. Well, let's get into it. So first matchup. So Saturday are the two 1 seed versus 4 seed matchups, or lower. I think the Giants were. I mean, if you were put it in the remaining seeding 1 through 4, Giants and Jags are 4, Eagles and Chiefs because they had the bye are 1. So the first game of the week, Saturday, 3:30 p.m. Eastern. Jags at Chiefs. Jags are 8.5 point dogs. Over under is 52.5. Let's just talk about the game and then we'll give our picks as we kind of talk through it. I don't like this spread because of the line. I lean Chiefs minus 8.5, but I think the better play here is the under 53.5. 94% of the money is on the under at 53. So that's kind of a system play. I just don't see both these teams scoring a combined 53 points. I think you could see a Chiefs 38-point victory with the Jags scoring a single touchdown, and that over doesn't hit. Um, so I think it's going to be tough for the Jags to get up after like a very emotional win. Um, so I kind of lean the Chiefs here at home. Trevor Lawrence already made this mistake of saying he doesn't think Arrowhead is going to be any louder than the Jacksonville Stadium, which seems a little laughable. So I lean the Chiefs on the spread. I'm going to take the under 53 here. I think the Chiefs. I think this will be the biggest snoozer of a game that we have this week.
Yeah, I think this game will be entertaining, but I don't think it'll be competitive. I'm with you on
That's a
the
good way to put
under.
it.
I like KC -9 better. I think they pull away late. I wouldn't be surprised if this is 10. It ultimately ends up there, but I do think that Kansas City wins this game by a minimum of 2 possessions.
Yeah, and
And
this is one of those like you're in the divisional round. There's no breaks. Like if there's 2 minutes left in the fourth quarter and you're up by less than 3 touchdowns, like you're airing the ball out
Yeah,
to try and
exactly.
put up a
There's yeah,
score.
you're not giving they're not conceding the game until this is dead over. So I do think yeah, I think Kansas City is just going to show that like playoff experience matters and the rest is going to matter. And I think you're right. I think this is part of like climbing the ladder towards the top of the NFL. I mean, not everybody's Joe Burrow and can just do it in a year. Like Joe Burrow is an outlier, not the he's the exception, not the rule, obviously. So
Correct.
it so I mean, to expect Trevor Lawrence to go beat Patrick Mahomes in Arrowhead, the way that we've seen other, somebody like Joe Burrow do that, it's not going to happen. They're going to win by 2 TDs. I think Jacksonville might put up a valiant effort in the first half. I think Kansas City eventually pulls away in the second half. They win by 2 scores. The total I'm a little less convinced on. I'm going to stick with the under just because I think you're right. I don't think both teams get there. I think this could be like a you know 31-17, and this game stays under. That would be under 50 points, right? I'm not stupid. Yeah,
Yes.
47, 48. Yeah. So I think that could be your score line because I think Kansas City's defense rested probably plays pretty well in this game. Um, but yeah, I have a hard time seeing Jacksonville really in this game. And like I said, I think contrary to what would be your normal assumption that Jacksonville will never feel like they're out of this game, I do feel like if they go down early, fairly big, they will feel like they're out of this game.
Yeah, and not only that, I mean, we talk about it more for college football, but a big emotional win like that, I think it takes the air out a little bit as you go into the next game, regardless of this situation. I mean, I think you're just very, very drained, and
Yeah,
that's a very daunting thing.
I think it's also like I think that it depends on the team and where their mindset is. Like I don't think Jacksonville necessarily carries the mindset in any legitimate way that they are Super Bowl contenders. And so when you win a game like that against, coming back in that way,
As an underdog
yeah, as an
at home,
underdog at home, you that was your Super Bowl to a certain extent from a mental standpoint. That was your Super Bowl win. So to come back, your point is well taken in that emotionally it's tough, but it's not just that. It's combined with the fact that this team doesn't have the expectation that Kansas City has. If it were a team like Kansas City who came back from 27 down and won that game, you expect them to come right back because look, winning the wild card round is not their goal. Their goal is to win
right?
a Super Bowl. Jacksonville never expected to win a Super Bowl this year. It's not their goal, no
Within
matter what
reason,
they
yes.
tell you. Yeah,
The 53 on the field might say yes, but the reality
the
behind
reality, and somewhere deep down, like I said, in places they don't talk about, they will somewhere they would admit that that wasn't their goal this year. So it's just tough to then reframe your expectation to go be able to do that now because you won that game against LA. It's not going to happen. So all that to say, I think Kansas City wins this game fairly comfortably. I don't. I think you're right in that this won't be the most competitive game. I do think it'll be entertaining because I do expect Trevor Lawrence to put up a good fight in this game, but it's not going to happen for Jacksonville.
all right, let's move on. I think this could be one of the better games of the week. Saturday, 7:15 Eastern. I'm sorry, 8:15 Eastern. Giants at Eagles. Um, Spread is 7.5 in favor of the Eagles. Over under is 47.5. So Eagles minus 7.5, obviously. Um, I have two takes here. One, I think the Giants have a lot of momentum. I think they're poised to make a good run here, and I think if I'm the Eagles, I would be scared shitless of this Giants team. Uh, the way the Giants have been playing lately is very impressive, and they're a good team. They're a well coached team, and they're picking up steam going into the playoffs. I am not entirely convinced that Jalen Hurts is not still recovering from injury, and that I don't know that he will be used in the same capacity that he's been used in the past. Where, like, I think if you're Nick Sirianni, the Eagles head coach, I think part of you is almost holding him back, especially on designed runs, but even scrambling outside the pocket, you're probably demanding he make more conservative choices simply because you don't want him to get continually injured and then make the championship game against possibly the Cowboys, but have your backup now playing because your star quarterback Jalen Hurts is injured, re-injured, something that has already been aggravated. I think and we really haven't seen Hurts play since getting injured. I don't think he's fully recovered. So with that in mind, and with how the Giants have been playing, I'm going to take a full touchdown plus a half point against the Eagles. I know how the Eagles played in the early onset of the season. In reality, they're probably a 16-1 team. I know that's insulting, but the only team to beat Jalen Hurts was Washington when he started. So you have this ability for the Giants to come in against someone coming off an injury, star quarterback coming off an injury, and you're 7.5 point dogs. I love the Giants plus 7.5. Love the Giants plus 7.5. I don't think the Eagles come out here on off a bye week. I mean, sure they'll be fired up, but I don't think they'll come out and be so dominant towards the Giants that the Giants, who have already played the Eagles twice and have been scheming against the Eagles twice this year and have game plans they know don't work against the Eagles, come out and just look dead. So I'm taking the Giants plus 7.5 um, in this game. I also like the Giants team total over 19.5. I think they get at least 3 touchdowns here. I think the way they've been playing is nothing short of impressive, and I think they give the Eagles, at the very least, they give the Eagles a run for their money. I might even sprinkle the money line because it's right now it's at plus 300 because I think that's a really good possibility that they actually come out on top here. Keep in mind the Giants played so well whenever they were not the perennial favorites for the Super Bowl. Their Super Bowl victories, when they were a 7th seed, they were a 6th seed, they're a wild card team. They're always the underdogs in these situations, and then you blink, and the New York Football Giants are in the Super Bowl, and you're like, how the hell did this happen? So I think I'm going to absolutely take 7.5. It would not shock me if the Giants won this outright.
I feel differently.
Okay.
Um, I I am. I think that what we saw with the Eagles was a combination of an piling up of injuries at the end of the year, to include Jalen Hurts. I think you're right. I don't think he'll be 100%. I think he will be in good enough shape that he will be able to do everything he needs to do to win this game.
Okay.
But what
By 7.5 points?
I think so. I'm taking, so just to be clear on that last game, I took KC -9. I took the under 52.5. This game, I'm taking Philly -7.5, and I'm going to take the over at 48. Um, like I said, I think people are looking at the way the Giants have played, and I think they're underestimating just how dominant Philly was in that first matchup. And in a game where at that time we were, everybody has been praising Dable all season, rightly so, me above most other people. But I took the Giants in that first game thinking that they would keep that game close because Dable did it the entire season with a team that is not that talented. And Philly came out and dog walked the Giants immediately, to the tune of, I think they went up 21-0 before the Giants even blinked. Now, we always talk about how it's harder to beat a team the second time, harder to beat the team the third time. I think this is where just the sheer lack of talent on the Giants sideline, I think, comes home to roost. And I don't think it'll be a dominant win in the way that I'm sort of building it up to be. I don't think that Philly is going to win this game by 24, 26, whatever they won it. They won it. They won the first game, which was only in December. I think everybody thinks that that game was forever ago, and it was December 11th. They won 48-22, literally doubled up the Giants. So I think, um, you know, I think all of that is true, and then I'm combining that with this fact. I think Philly for the first half of the season was in the process of realizing how good they are, and I say are because they should have most of the roster back healthy, except for a couple guys who they've lost for the year. And I think that that sort of, we talked about framing expectations of where a team reasonably expects to be. I think at that point, Philly reframed its expectations to we're going to try to win the Super Bowl and we're the best team in the NFC and we are going to win the NFC and should have a very good chance to win the Super Bowl. And I think what you saw in the second part of the late part of the season is a team, sort of peaking and then bringing it back down in preparation to peak again. And I think that going into this game, I wouldn't be surprised if we see a Philly come out with a different attitude that I think most people are sort of sleeping on because I do think that the Giants, there's no they will be just as motivated as the Giants. The Giants are riding high. They feel great. I think Philly will. Nick Sirianni will find a way to get these guys into a state of mind where they feel like that's a slight against them, and their superior talent, I think, just shines through in this game. I think they could be 8. I think it could be 10. I do think though it's more likely that Philly pulls away late in this game to the tune of a 2 possession victory. I think the Giants are going to play this game pretty tough. I think the way if Philly recaptures what they've had all season at the very beginning of this game, they're going to go back into steamroller mode, which they have been in this entire year, and they I think go back to just demolishing teams the way they have been. I think that it doesn't necessarily manifest itself in a huge score line this week, but I wouldn't be surprised if we look back at this game and we say it was only a 10-point win, but Philly, this game was never really in doubt.
Never in question. Okay.
Yeah. So
I don't hate
that's
that.
my
I don't
logic.
hate that. I don't hate it. I don't hate it. I think the way that the Giants are playing, my analysis is more reliant on I don't think Hurts is open about how injured he still is. But we'll see. That's why they play the game, man. We're
Mhm.
excited. Sunday, 2 p.m., 3 p.m. Eastern. Bengals at Bills. Probably the most anticipated matchup of the playoffs so far, I would say, right? I don't know that I would hear disagreements on that.
And definitely not for
Over
me. I think this is going to be we might look back on this game and this might be the best game of the playoffs as a whole.
of the season, even. Yeah. So Bengals are 5.5 point dogs. Over unders 48.5. Mike, I'll let you go first because I keep hogging the mic at the onset here.
Yeah, I think that like I said, my analysis of this game leads to where I am in this game. I'm on Cincinnati plus 5.5. I'm also going to take them when I go wager legally in Virginia. I'm going to take them at plus 61 on the first half money line. I and I'm going to take the over 49. I think this game turns into a shootout. I think 5.5 is way too many points for Cincinnati in this game. I get it. DeMar Hamlin's probably going to be there. They're going to be all juiced up. The I think since the way that the NFL handled the Cincinnati Buffalo tiebreak has really pissed them off, and I think that they're using this game. It's nothing against the Bills. It's not an animosity against the Bills. I think that this game is going to be a cathartic experience for Cincinnati in sort of releasing the doubt that has festered about them as a legitimately good team this entire season, even going back to last season's Super Bowl appearance. Uh, and the chance they had to win that game. I think this game, this moment, going to beat the Super Bowl favorites um, that have been that way the entire year, despite the fact that the Bengals are the reigning AFC champions. I think this game serves to slay that dragon metaphorically for this entire season for the Bengals. I think it's dangerous when when you're picking trying to read too much in the emotions of teams. But as I was saying earlier, I think the way that Joe Burrow and the way that Zach Taylor and the players have approached this game with the media, I think that there is some sort of real like visceral team spirit in that locker room right now that I think is going to show up on the field. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if DeMar Hamlin comes out and Buffalo is going ballistic and they're so distracted that Joe Burrow walks right down the field and scores right away. And it becomes an uphill sled for Buffalo to get themselves into this game. And that's why I think there's a really good chance that Cincinnati leads at the half. I think there's a very good chance that they cover this. The only thing that really scares me about 5.5 is the fact that this game could end up like we talked about with the Vikings Giants last week, where it's either tied or one team's up 7, and that's the
Yep.
only thing that scares me about this line. But if you put a gun to your head right now with the way these two teams are playing, take the Damar Hamlins, take all the emotions out of it. Is Buffalo at its current state of health 5.5 points better than Cincinnati? I think the answer to that is absolutely not. They might be better. They may be. I'm not here to say that Buffalo's not a good football team. I just don't think they're 5.5 points better than Cincinnati. I think Cincinnati. There's a really good chance Cincinnati wins this game, and I mean a really good chance. Um, I'm not going to take them with the full money line. I do think they go into the half up, but I think they cover 5.5. I think this game, this is going to be a war. This is going to be a battle of the wills, and I think this is going to sound crazy, but to not make a mistake in the fourth quarter, I think I might trust Joe Burrow a little bit more than Josh Allen. And so for all those reasons, I'm taking Cincinnati plus 5.5. I'm taking them first half money line plus 161, and I'm going to take the over at 49 just because I think both of these teams are going to get over their share of 25 points.
So that is my best bet. Bills Bengals over 48.5. In my mind, this screams shootout. I don't think there's any playoff game that the Chiefs, Bengals, or Bills could like. Any one of those teams could be in, and you could give me any number, and I'd bet the over because I really do think the Bills' defense is good, but nothing to write home about. They're not winning you a championship all on their own, and neither are the Bengals. Both have great offenses. Both are going to be explosive. So I love the over. And if you're telling me that a game is going to be a shootout, then I'm going to rely on the fact that it's probably not a shootout where you're relying on the Bengals to go down and drive down the field with down a touchdown. You know what I mean? And even if that's the case, I trust Joe Burrow to drive down the field and score a touchdown. So I agree with you. I'm going to take Bengals 5.5 plus 5.5. I'm 100% taking over 48.5. That's my best bet for that game. I'll lay both. I might parlay it, but I'm going to have more money on the over 48.5. 49, whatever it is. But yeah, this is by far what I expect to be the best game of the week. And I'm very, very, very excited for this game. I cannot wait. I will be glued to my television.
Agreed.
Last game of the week, Sunday, 6:30 p.m. Cowboys at 49ers. 49ers coming in with a head of steam at home. They are 3.5 point favorites. The over-under is 46.5. You want to go first or second on this last one? It's up to you.
I'll take this one.
Okay.
Because my analysis is very simple. I mean, the under here is the system play. All of my picks here are system plays, and it's going to be Dallas under 46.5 right now. Cash is at 86%. Tickets are 62% on the over, so almost a dead flip. And then so I'm going to take Dallas plus 4 purely on the system play. Cash is 73% on Dallas. Tickets are 64% on San Francisco. I'm fading the system with Kansas City and Cincinnati. Jacksonville is getting 82% of the cash. Kansas City 53% of the tickets. To a lesser extent, Philly is getting. Philly's a system play in that the Giants are getting 52% of the cash, 57% of the tickets, so kind of a wash there. But Buffalo is getting 60% of the cash, whereas Cincinnati is getting 69% of the tickets. So with Kansas City and Cincinnati, I'm fading the system. Here, I'm sticking with the system just because I have no idea what's going to happen. Like I truly don't. Like I said, I think it doesn't come down to as much San Francisco because I think we saw their defense is not as great as we thought it was. Still very good. Still going to keep them in games. I think their offense plays pretty well. You're reliably expecting them to get to somewhere around 28 points. What Dallas does, it could be they could kick one field goal or they could win 44-28. Like you just don't. You have no clue. So in that case, I'm going to take this system. I'm going to lay the points, hope that they keep this within the number. I think San Francisco ends up winning this game. But I'm going to take the under here. Two pretty good defenses. I don't think Dak plays nearly as well as he did last game. Rookie quarterback in another high leverage situation. I think the tendency here would be that this game goes overall lower. So I'm going to take the under and Dallas plus 4. Take the underdog when you expect it to go lower. sort of feeds into the play here. So I'm taking Dallas +4 with no confidence that this actually hits. It's purely on the system, and then I'm way more confident in the under because I do think this is going to be a bit of a slugfest. Also calling for a ton of rain this week in Santa Clara, which is going to make the field a bit messy.
Yeah, so I have the under 46.5 as well for this game. I don't have a play on the spread. I will take Dak to throw at least one interception, and it's about at even money right now. I just think he's turned the ball over too much, and against a good 49ers defense, I think he's going to struggle to find those pockets, find the pocket, and then make a pass without making at least one mistake this week. I will say, if you're going to bet the spread on this, and this goes against you, Mike, so I apologize. The margin of victory and margin of defeat for the Dallas Cowboys is so high. It's like 14 points both ways, or it's like 11 points and 14 points. The Cowboys really never play in one score games because they're never in one score games. They're either so overpowering that they just dominate a team, and usually it's a bad team, or they play a good team and they get their shit rocked and they lose by like 8, 10, 12, 15 points. And honestly, I think this is when it's going to happen. I was very right last week about the Cowboys. I said they're going to come out and they're going to dominate, and people are going to think, oh, maybe the Cowboys have got something going. And now they're playing the 49ers, probably the team with the best momentum going into the playoffs. I think the 49ers cover, but I'm not going to lay the points there. But I will say, if you think the 49ers are going to win, you know what? Fuck it. I'm going to take -3.5. Here's the reason. The point differential is so high that either the Cowboys are going to win outright and probably cover the reverse line, so like -2.5, which you could probably get for like +200-ish,
Mm-hmm.
or they are going to lose, and they're going to lose badly, and they're going to
Mm-hmm.
lose by like 2 touchdowns. And I see the latter happening. I think this is the classic, like, Cowboys are destroyed. Cowboy fans, that's like sad meme you always see. They won't be at home. They won't be in Jerry World. I see this as a 49ers rout against the Dallas Cowboys, who admittedly, I think fans would admit, I don't think they've played well against good teams. They've dominated bad teams. They've struggled against good teams. I think that trend continues. I think the 49ers, regardless of how well Brock Purdy plays, as long as he plays decent, run the ball down the Cowboys' throats. And unless the Cowboys defense really like steps it up a notch from how they've been playing, I don't think the Cowboys will win this game. So that's my take on this
I
game.
I don't
I
hate
know
it,
the
and
money's on it, but
I don't hate it. I almost actually, I would say I probably agree with you. It's just like I said. The variance with Dallas. I have no idea. And here's what I feel like is going to happen now that I am on Dallas. I feel like Shanahan's going to have like a one of those performances like against the Packers where George Kittle's just running go routes and they're hitting them over and over and over again off of play action. And they are just running the ball down Dallas's throat, and Dallas looks helpless. And I'm going to be like, why didn't I just stick with what I thought was going to happen? And it's just that's the way it feels. So I think it's just me not having the guts to go against the system in almost every play this week, and to just ride with the public. But I wouldn't be shocked at all. I wouldn't be shocked if San Francisco dominates this game, and Dallas looks helpless and they go back to tiers two. Because I think the other thing too is Kyle Shanahan on one end, watermelon smashing Mike McCarthy on the other end, and it's just like, who do you trust more? One guy has a Super Bowl, one guy blew a 28-3 lead, but I trust the guy who blew the 28-3 lead way more because, as far as I could tell, Mike McCarthy just stands there. So
yeah. I mean, I don't have particular love for the guy. I think obviously he's a very good coach because he's playing. But yeah,
yeah, no thought. Anyway, that I kind of agree with San Francisco.
okay. Well, hey, look, that's our show breaking down everything. Like and subscribe. We'll do another episode next week after the divisional round is over, and let's see who's getting into the championship games. Should be a fun matchup. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe.